I'm often told that we should never live in the past or to only look forward. And I disagree with that. And that is what I want to talk to you about today. Welcome to the Mindfuckery podcast, which is FeedSpot's fifth must-listen to podcast on emotional abuse. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and in here we explore areas others are feared to tread. Through my own personal journey, I know how much this hurts and how confusing life becomes. So many questions, no closure, and no real answers. I've been a woundologist for over 20 years. I'm the unintentional author of Finding Lily, the A to Z of emotional abuse and divorce matters. I help you clear past life wounds, ancestral trauma, and this life wounding. And as the founder of the Inner Healing Sanctuary, I've created Wound Talking, The Original Wound, and Quantum Glow. I'm on a mission to help educate as many people as I can on the effects of trauma on our lives and our children's lives, and healing the wounds of our mothers and our fathers. It stops here, it stops now, it stops with us. So welcome along for the journey of a lifetime. And as ever, you're very, very welcome. This week I want to talk about how looking back can be helpful. We're often told not to look back, to look forward, to concentrate on where we're going. And I've had quite a few conversations about this. I'm going to talk about a particular wounding that can happen. It happens during the relationship, but it's a really good indicator of how far we've come. And if this happens to you, I want to show you that you can actually use this wound to show you your healing. So as I said, I've had a few conversations about this. It's around the relationship. You've come out of this relationship. Maybe you can breathe again. Maybe you're starting to heal and do some inner work and build up your self-esteem. Maybe you're not so jumpy. But this particular wound is around self-esteem. It's also around the abuser moving on. Now, there are so many different elements to this. There's so much information around relationships and new relationships, and they can be triggers, but they also can be an indication of how we've healed. So I'm trying to think of an example. It might be that you've come out of the relationship and then you find out that they've quite quickly got themselves into a new relationship, which is very common. This has nothing to do with you, all to do with them. They very likely had set up a new relationship, and depending on what type they are, they might stay in a relationship for a period of time. They might be emotionally abusive type that just move on every few months, every few years. They've got somebody else. Now, there's a pain inside for some, which is a wound. This wound is of not being good enough. What's wrong with me? Why wasn't I good enough? You title it in the way that works for you. And this wounding comes from the idealization period when they were romancing you, when they were the best thing. And you might have heard things about their previous relationships where they were never understood, they were never heard. They told you all these negative things about the person they were in a relationship with. And then over a period of time, they might have triangulated you with this old love. And what you were doing during the time of idealization, particularly in that first part of that romance where you've met them and it's all new and fresh and exciting, and they're telling you about all of their exes, might just be one, it might be a few, and you are making a mental note of all of these things not to do. They are treating you in a way that you've never been treated before, speaking to you in a language that you've never been spoken to before. They're seeing and hearing you and validating you, and during that time they're telling you about all the awful things that their exes did, whether it's how they looked after themselves, as in their grooming and personal care, or whether it's personal attacks on the abuser, playing the victim, whether it's what they would and wouldn't do sexually, whether it's, I'm trying to think of lots of different examples and my mind's gone blank. It might be the way the ex spoke to them, the way they treated them, and that this was all done in a negative way. Because of the validation that you're experiencing, you're mentally recording this, maybe on a subconscious level, never to do this to them, or to think about your personal grooming. And it might even be that they want you to change your hair color. It might be that they compare you sexually in bed to another person. These are all the things that you're making a mental note of. And then as they take you round this cycle of abuse where they devalue you, there's those slight might put down something, they're really, really slight. They might make a comment about something, and it might just be that moment where you go, oh, that's really weird. You've always thought that was a really good trait of mine. And then they might take you back up. Oh, I was only joking. You're too sensitive. Taking you round this cycle. So they're breaking down your self-esteem. They're getting you to question everything and make you believe, particularly when you've come to the final discard, that this was all your fault, and that will have been done over a period of time. It doesn't just happen over a short period of time. It is happening very, very subtly. So these isolated moments are just that, and it is only when you put them all together and realize this was systematic, this was happening right the way through the relationship, that you can see it as abusive. But because they are isolated, it feels like it's a one-off until they start to get closer and closer and closer and closer together, until it's continuous. And they swing back round, they're so sorry, they didn't mean it, they misunderstood what you were saying. So this is where this piece comes in. They've demolished your self-esteem and you believe this is all your fault. Everything that's happened, the relationship breakdown, they didn't do anything wrong, it's all your fault, until parts of you start waking up. And it might be that they have a new love in their life that they're parading round, and the wound of what's wrong with me and why aren't you good enough, or whatever it is that you've titled, plays up. It pops up. It wants to know what's going on. It hurts until you realize and you work through that pain, the torture, the abuse that happened, and you start to realize this wasn't your fault. This wasn't anything that you'd done. It doesn't matter what you could have done or would have done or should have done. You were always going to be in this place. And I had this conversation on Saturday with someone I was working with. It's as if the abuser can sniff out your wounds and they know exactly what to do and how to trigger them. Existing wounds from childhood, and they highlight them. They bring them to the surface for healing. And if you feel nothing, you know that's it. If you're still screaming inside, why aren't I good enough, then you know there's healing to be done. Somebody was telling me something last week and how they'd been accused of something, and they stopped for a moment and they took on that belief. Now, this is an ex, they are separated, and they were questioning what they were being told until they realised, actually, that's not true. I'm like that with you. I'm not like that with anybody else. And something similar happened to me. And to me, this is the gauge. I was always told that I had trust issues, and it was from being cheated on by previous partners, until I realised that that was a lie, and I was able to break it because it was my ex telling me this that was actually I had trust issues with, because of his behaviour, what he'd done and what he'd been up to, and at the end of the relationship, what he was doing again. But I took that belief on for a very long time, and that's where the gauge is. The gauge is when you know, you get caught up in this cycle of rumination, you go over everything, this is all your fault, what you did wrong, and gradually over time your brain starts to come round. It's as if it's been anaesthetised by the trauma, and it has actually, and it is able to wake up and it's able to challenge these statements, these beliefs. And that really is the core of a lot of work that I do. One of my courses is Honest Conversations. It's having these honest conversations with yourself and healing from that place. And that's why it's so important to look back, because there were months that I was on the floor, years that I believe this is all my fault. Actually having these conversations with myself and challenging some of these things that I'd been told, that I was able to say no. And it's not even on my radar now. If something came up, I'd be able to challenge it straight away. I wouldn't get trapped in rumination. And it's such a powerful, powerful tool to be able to look back and say, this is how far I've come. Yeah, I've still got some work to do, but this is how far I've come. And that allows you to stand straight, put your shoulders back and hold your head high, because these relationships have a lesson for each and every one of us, and that is to highlight the wounds that we've been given, whether they have been passed down through our ancestors, from our great grandparents through to us, even further back. We are the ones that can turn around and say, no, it stops here, it stops with us, I'm not taking this any further. And we build up and heal from the inside out. If you'd like any information on the courses that I run, or if you'd like to work with me one-to-one, please reach out. Love to hear from you. I hope this video week has been helpful, look over your shoulder, pick which one, left or right, see how far you've come. As always, I'm sending you loads and loads of love until next time.